Hello, everyone, and welcome to Animals in the Bible Study Podcast. This time we're going to be returning to Job, and we're going to be looking at Job's wealth briefly, just because I think it's important to consider just how wealthy Job was. One of the things that we kind of overlook in today's society is how much wealth has been generated through what is today agricultural, and this includes, of course, both animal and plant products. How much of our wealth and our success as a modern innovation society uh, really has happened because of the natural world and our ability to really take advantage of it, subdue it, and bring it into fruition. If we think of something like chickens, right, we get eggs, we get meat, um, the grain industry, which relies on feeding these animals so much of the time, uh, the new advancements in animal feeding, animal husbandry, to take care of these animals, all sorts of those things. And so of course, we start off Job by actually giving us an account of how wealthy Job was. It says he had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. That's the opening part of where we see how wealthy Job is, and that a large percentage of his wealth is made up of animals, right? And this is because, again, imagine in today's world, like you don't have the technology where you can mass produce on such a large scale and be able to um, have animals at much cheaper prices. Individuals are allowed to have animals quite accessibly. Um, Pets, of course, and animals. There's tons of people that own horses that never owned horses, dogs that never used to own dogs, all sorts of things, right? And to be raise them in your own backyard, right? We can raise like chickens and rabbits now and some smaller animals like pigs and goats in our own backyard. Well, there wasn't really the kind of space or means to do that because we also didn't have the ability to uh, agriculturally control as much as we do now. Doesn't mean there wasn't irrigation back then, and as of course in later centuries, it became very sophisticated with the Babylonians and the some Egyptians, and then of course in Rome especially. But still, this is very early on before a lot of that has been developed to any significant range. So you also had to have the land necessary in order to raise all these creatures. And so imagine having the amount of animals Job has versus the number of land and then the number of servants that were necessary in order for that to happen. I was looking up even today, the average camel goes for about $15,000, $10,000. So imagine what that is worth in much older times. It's uh, way much more. So even in today's dollars, if you count the 3,000 camels that Job had, and it's an average about uh, that much, which is that takes it to be about like $51 million Job spent on in today's money spent on camels. Think how much more it was expense wise, land wise, servant wise, um, to maintain and care for these animals, especially in an environment that may not have always been able to provide that. It's unclear how. Now, it is possible that probably the land of Uz was probably less desert and more of a rich land than it is today. But still, that still requires tons and tons of land. And again, you don't have the resources as an individual person to be able to control that as much. And so, and then of course, then you think about the probably the fact he was selling camels to breed. He was probably producing camel meat, so he needed more. So he still needed the breeding uh, ways of properly maintaining an environment in which they could breed successfully over and over again. All that sort of stuff, and it really takes a hold just how wealthy Job was. And so that was so when we read that, it may not seem like a lot to us, especially in today's culture. I mean, 3,000, was it 3,000 camels? That actually doesn't seem like quite as much as it seems today. But think about it, even in today's terms, and then even going back 6,000 years, just how wealthy Job was to maintain all this. And and then of course he had to properly provide and take care of his servants, and it appears that Job did so. It wasn't like he was maintaining kind of a slave kind of servant thing where they were working for nothing, right? So, in order to maintain the number of servants he had and provide them with kind of the well off they needed in order to be have livelihoods of their own is pretty amazing. And so that's why we then get into the heart, which is, of course, the first thing that really happens in the book of Job is that God allows Job to suffer. And the way he allows Job to suffer is he allows Satan, or a being called Satan. We're not quite sure whether it was Satan directly or some other spiritual being uh, similar. We don't know exactly. But we do know that he allowed this Satan to attack everything except Job himself. And it starts in verse 13. One day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came and said the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby. And the Sabaeans attacked and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the sky and burned up all the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one to escape to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept on your camels and carried them off and put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While I was still speaking, yet another messenger came, said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the older brother's house, and when a sudden mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house, it collapsed on them, and they were dead, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. And then, of course, reading again, this is what, of course, Job said. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. In the name of the Lord be praised. And in all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. And what makes it more amazing, of course, is that besides the loss of animals, he lost all of his children. We were told earlier that he had, and I might have read this, he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. So 10 children. In one moment, even his 10 children, the ones who were probably going to inherit all this, who were to carry on his lineage and his wealth and his prosperity and probably grow it even bigger than it was, right? And that's a big thing that we don't think about in today's culture as much, is like your inheritance. We don't have huge companies in which they had stockbrokers and all that sort of stuff. I mean, some of this has happened in times past before, but in especially smaller communities, or usually, especially in a lot of farming communities, um, a lot of that wealth was just inherently tied to family wealth and prestige. So hopefully, the ones to inherit all this would be your own kin. They put much more stock in lineage than we do today, and whether or not our money goes to our kids is not as relevant as it was for a number of different reasons I won't go into. But your all your value flowed out into your kids, especially in these times. It was kind of the symbol your of just how far you succeeded, is that you could also give it over to people of your own blood. And so not only does he lose everything, he loses the people who would have inherited it, and has nothing left even to give away if he even had it, right? And so it's important to remember just how much Job lost. And I think we fail to understand that sometimes, just how much Job lost. That he basically lost it all and had no way, in any meaningful sense, of getting it back, as far as we can tell, right? So he's basically reduced to nothing. It'd be like a large corporation today just going completely bankrupt, and a lot of these, and having to start basically from scratch. You've basically thrown away the entire company. You have nothing left. And by the way, all the people who wouldn't have inherited it, they're gone. All the people who are your uh, assets as fellow friends and fellow workers, all that is lost. Because remember, he also loses nearly all of his servants. Only 4 servants survive. So he's lost everything. Oh, and he's going to lose, of course, a whole lot more, including even his own health. So, of course, big question of the hour is, what are you prepared to lose? Are you prepared to lose everything? Speak as Job spoke. I mean, Job didn't have like insurance policy. He could easily be reimbursed for everything. He didn't have that. He didn't have mechanisms in place to protect himself, and there was little he could do to get it back. And on top of all that, he's going to get harassed. He's going to be judged unfairly. Um, he's going to have many whispers basically behind his back, so, or even to his face, especially. And but they're probably thinking things in the back of their head that they're not even willing to say. His own friends. So, how much are you prepared to lose? He said, anyone who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not worthy of me. That's because he wants us to be something greater. Uh, John and some of the other apostles were probably making pretty good livings in their lives. I mean, fishing was, I mean, pretty good business. It probably wasn't the wealthiest position, but I mean, it could probably was. You know, you get fish to market pretty well, and you're probably not terribly well off, terrible in your life. And yet Jesus called many of them out of fishing to be fishers of men. And that's a reminder for all of us to be willing to give up something, to lose everything. And it may be all be gone by tomorrow. We don't know what will happen. Odd things happen, strange things happen. And they're not necessarily tied to anything bad or good we've done, but the state that we live in a fallen world. And we need to remind ourselves just how little we're in control, how little we can plan our own lives. It's good to make plans, it's good to prepare, it's good to count the cost. Jesus told us to do that as well. But Jesus also warned us about having too much pride in ourselves that we basically say we don't have to worry and nothing will happen, and we make, and to think that our plans will somehow go the way we expect all the time is not realistic. We can make plans, but we cannot not always be certain. We can't be proud in that. And knowing where all in the end where it all comes from. It all comes from God. Right? The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised, because he gives readily and abundantly, and he takes and gives not because um, he wants us to suffer necessarily, but he tests us and he uses us to show just uh, how much we can hold on to things that have no value, and instead asks us to rely on him. And if we rely on him, he is generous, and we have so much greater things to look forward to. We will have positions of authority and sitting on seats of power. We will experience glory and um, wealth beyond our imagining, uh, streets paved with gold. And it'll be nothing comparison to seeing Christ in him magnified. So, yeah, Job had a lot more than we can probably imagine for most of us. But he knew where his true value lay, was in knowing God and knowing who his Redeemer was. He knew his Redeemer would come, stand upon the earth, and redeem all things, even his own circumstances, which he failed to understand, and which in the moment felt like such blows, such unnecessary hardship. But God would be present. So there we are. Have a good day.